Yeah, the hell you are over there, John. Sorry, I guess I'm not the first person to say that. Yeah.
Definitely, Sean.
Your question.
What steps would your party take to protect our green spaces from the sort of overdevelopment that has become rife over the past 5 years? I emphasise green spaces. I don't just mean green belt.
Let me just tell you a little story. I drove in this evening and came in down the A5 and along the 444, and I saw all the lovely new houses on all the green fields on the 444. And then as I got a bit further in, I saw all these brownfield sites for sale with no buildings on at all. Marcus, has it gone badly wrong? What would you do to protect green fields? Not only are we building in this area, but there's also signs going up now saying this isn't going to be a field for much longer. We're going to build more houses. It's been acquired for building. Is that the way forward?
Well, I think we've got to accept that we do need new development. There's a real shortage of housing, but any new development has got to be proportionate, and it's got to be in keeping with the area. It's got to have the right infrastructure. It's got to have the roads, the school places, GP surgery places, and so on and so forth. In terms of our policy does protect strongly the green belt. The big issue we've had here locally is, though, that we have got a council that hasn't put in place a local plan.
But isn't it quite the reverse? Your policies, your changes to the planning regulations have meant exactly the opposite of that. And if I had £1 for every story I've done where the green belt has not been preserved, and we're not even talking about greenfield, Marcus, we're talking about green belt, which was when I was a kid. Only God was allowed to build on that.
Well, the big problem is, and it was the same under the previous government, councils have got to have a local plan. And this council hasn't got one. 81% of councils have now either got a local plan or have submitted a local plan to the inspectors. But I'm afraid if the Labour Party got in reality, it will only be a Conservative or a Labour MP after this election in this constituency. They want to build far more houses than the Conservatives. They want an extra 200,000 a year, and they want to allow larger authorities like Coventry and Birmingham to actually be able to move their boundaries, and that's the last thing we want in our area being dictated to by places like Coventry and Birmingham.
Vicky, is that what you want to do?
No, it's not. And actually, what the Labour Party said, we want to reintroduce the Brownfield First policy, which has been taken away under this government. But actually, as well, we do need to be talking about housing, because on the doorstep, I'm speaking to young people who are saying, look, I really want to live close to my family. I've got a local job. Where are the houses that are there for me and my future families? And honestly, we need to be talking about affordable housing, council housing, schemes where first-time buyers can access mortgages. And there's another side to the debate when we're talking about housing, and we can't forget that, and that's really important.
Do you have any sense that the problem is also that the whole system is broken? Because cross-party, people don't have pensions anymore. And what's interesting is when they build 1- and 2-bedroom flats or maisonettes or small properties, people without a pension or have had a pension that's failed will then say, OK, I'm going to invest in that. And then that takes it out of the hands of first-time buyers. How do you fix that as a system?
Well, one of the big things we need to look at is the pension system. And it starts with making sure that when people access their pensions, when they're putting in from a young age into the pension pot, that actually they're getting clear advice on what they're putting their money into. And it's not there at the moment. It's not clear. And pensions are really confusing things at the best of times. So Labour said that we want to regulate the pension system more closely so that people know where their money is going. And at the end of it, they're not going to be left without, without money, so that actually, ultimately, those problems should sort themselves out in a sense, because people are going to have better pensions at the end of it. But I do accept your point about housing, and I think, those conversations have got to be had, and ultimately, a lot of people tell me that they like to sort of pass their houses on to their children, or make sure that their children have got, money to put down as a deposit. And that's a nice thing that people can sort of do that for their children.
When you walk around Nuneaton, do you get the sense we're building in the right place or not?
there's various consultations that are out there, and people.
No, but as a human, as a human being, as somebody who lives in the area, you just walk around and you just think, what are they building houses there for? Oh, yeah, that's a great place to build. What a great idea. What's your sense of where we are now? Do you think we're getting it right largely or wrong largely? Are we building the right place or the wrong places?
I'm going to sort of go back to what I said, where people actually want to live. People want to live locally close to their families, and ultimately, you're looking around the Nuneaton, and you've got to build somewhere. And I think sometimes,
and that's somewhere. Is that the right place or the wrong place?
I don't know. It's not up to me on those decisions.
It is. I'm asking you, just as a gut feeling, not as a politician, just as a human being. Do you look around the town and think, yeah, these are great places to build, or not?
Yes, if people want to live there, that's perfect. We want people living locally.
And if that includes greenbelt land, then so be it.
No, I've said that Labour wants to introduce a brownfield first policy, but ultimately, sometimes, it might include other areas just because that's where we need the housing and that's where people want to live.
Keith Kondakor, we've talked many times about housing, about where you build, where you don't build.
This council is grossly incompetent. It's been working on a local plan for 9 years. Vicky Fowler was on the working party that decided where the houses would be built. 9 years, we're getting nowhere. Without a local plan, they build the most beautiful fields in Wellington, the beautiful fields in Galley Common, and the bomb sites around the Nuneaton are still bomb sites. There's a site over there, massive, derelict. There's sites up Queensway. Everything's derelict, doesn't get built, and the council has been grossly incompetent. We could have had a plan, and we could have built the houses we need. Only 200 houses have been built in the last year in the Nuneaton. The council is it grossly incompetent?
Alwyn, from a UKIP.
Well, we would repeal the National Planning Policy Framework. It's a deeply flawed document. It's described by the National Trust and this campaign.
So you don't agree with Keith, and Keith is saying it's the council is at fault
I
here,
do
but you say it's the framework they're working in.
It's a combination of factors. It's partly the National Planning Policy Framework because it incentivises development. It has a presumption in favour of development, and where there's no a borough plan or a 5-year land supply, it's even more firmly weighted in favour of the developer because they can cherry pick the sites where they want to build. They also have an automatic right of appeal, and combined with the new homes bonus, which gives councils 6 years additional council tax for every new home they build. That is a powerful incentive to build. Now, what we would do is repeal that and replace it with guidelines that really incentivise building on brownfield sites. So we'd have a national register of brownfield sites. We would incentivise by giving developers £10,000 for every unit so that they could properly prepare that site. We'd waive the stamp duty on the first purchase on that site, and we really would put everything into building on brownfield sites.
For housing, you're talking about there.
This is for housing.
So what happens when they start knocking down supermarkets to build houses because they're more lucrative? How do you counterbalance that? How do you make sure that... I always look for the loophole. How do people play the system? Don't you worry that system could be played?
No, I'm not sure that it would. Would they knock down a supermarket to build houses? Would they actually knock down a supermarket to build houses?
Maybe supermarket is a bad example, but they knock down commercial premises to build houses because it's more lucrative. Isn't that a danger?
Well, I presume if they're knocking down the commercial property, that it's probably no longer in use. And if that's the case, I really don't see anything wrong with it.
Okay, question from the floor.
Yeah, isn't the problem, it's a bit like education and health, that you've got private investment in housing, but similarly, we need the ability for governments to actually be able to build social housing. You're not going to get a developer that's going to say, oh yeah, I'll build you 300 council houses, in the back of this town hall. They want to do it on a development site. They're in it to make money. The problem has always been with the right to buy schemes and the extension of actually unbelievably housing associations being forced to sell off their stock as well. I mean, housing associations by and large are private companies. The most inefficient way of providing social housing is to use housing associations.
All right,
Why on earth can't either governments or local authorities be allowed to provide housing?
Marcus, do you want to come back on that one? It's not so much the right place, we're talking the right housing now as well.
Well, what I will say, we've changed the rules so local councils can start building houses again. This very council here, and I criticise them for a lot of things, has actually just started building the first council houses as a result of that have been built in many years. To answer the question about right to buy, I appreciate that the replacement needs to happen in relation to any properties that are sold, but I would point out that the majority of funding that goes to housing associations, who are non-for-profit companies generally, is from the government. But to be perfectly honest with you, 15 years ago, in a different property market, I was lucky enough to be able to buy a house myself, and I want people to have that aspiration to be able to get on the property ladder and have a home of their own.
You're not going to have time to ask a question. Just give us your thoughts then, what you're hearing.
What I'm hearing is closed minds in some respects, because Nuneaton's a wonderful place to live, there's some wonderful places to live, and we've built on nearly all the brownfield sites. The clay holes, the clay works, sterling metals, all of the other factories, they've all been built on. And the house that I live in, I've lived in for 40 years, was once a green field.